Awesome. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's RNK Software Club's video for the week. My name is Trevor, and I have with me my good friend Matthew here. How's it going, Matt?
Very well. How about you?
Very good. So many people have probably heard your voice and definitely had emails or support texts from you. But if you don't know, this is Matt, you guys. And Matthew is an important team member at RNK. He's often the first person that you hear from when you're, reaching out for help. And so, Matthew, I want to say thank you to you on behalf of all of the people. I always hear good things about Matthew whenever I travel. And, when people get to tell you stuff face to face, they'll always go out of their way to tell you how Matt helped me out even on the weekend. I hear that sometimes. And so I know you have a young family, and so we don't expect you to always do it, though. Just so you know, you have permission to take the night off if there's something going on at home. But everybody really appreciates everything you do, Matt.
It's my pleasure. Absolutely.
Good. So Matt had a question, and we decided that rather than just give the answer to Matt, why don't we make a recording this week? And so tell us what's going on at the support desk this week, Matt.
Well, one of the questions we get quite often is about the Auto Digitizing Wizard. People will say, I have this artwork or a logo that I'm trying to do for a project. And sometimes I run into thorny, the question will be, I've run into a thorny issue and where do I go from here? And
Right.
so what's your answer
I gotcha.
about that?
I got you. Okay. So Auto Digitizer, and you sent me an image, right? That we're going to look at it and see. Not to poke fun at anybody's image. And it's basically, we all kind of run into the same question. And this is, will auto digitizing work for this? And I think that's kind of what people really want to know is, when is it going to be suitable? And then when are they maybe not going to be able to get it? When does it not work out? So let's go ahead and take a look at all that. I'll just click on to, I'm just going to get my, share my screen. Yeah. And so by now you should be able to see the picture, and it's nice. Seems like it should be pretty good one for auto digitizing. I mean, it's like, kind of like just a couple of colors to it. Not too much to it. So the first, I'll tell you what the issue is, Matt, just right off the bat. And it's all about sort of resolution, or call it pixels if you want to. When you want to use the automation, the software has to do the tracing, right? Because notice that this is a JPEG image, and as much as I can see it on my screen, it's really just a backdrop, that I've opened up, and there's no shapes. I think that's the issue here, is that we want to be able to click on the hair and then tell it to make it a satin stitch, and that's, unfortunately, when you're starting from a JPEG, this is always the case. Somebody has to digitize it, meaning the shapes need to be created. Now, there's a variety of ways that can happen. And the wizard is like the fully automated one, right? Where you could take the wizard hat and you could go, we've got the kind of original auto digitizer wizard, and we've got the advanced one. And I don't think it matters which one you're going to use here. You're going to get the same results. I'll use the original one. How's that? If I click on select image, it's going to allow me to browse my computer. And so I think I saved yours to my desktop, and I'm just going to go ahead and select it. And so when I say next, the software starts to kind of tell me some information. And I guess the first thing that I notice is the picture is, oh, and sorry, my computer's set in Canadian, eh? It's in metric. But if I had changed my rulers over to inches, then this would say it's 2 inches tall, Matt. And so I guess the question is that the size that we want it, 2 inches or whatever? We'll leave it at 2 inches, assuming that was the size that the customer wanted, but maybe it was bigger. And it matters because, of course, the software has to decide things like what kind of stitch should it use. And it kind of uses all of that's based upon size. So making it bigger might change the results is part of what I'm saying. But either way, I think what we're going to find is that it's not kind of a perfect world because of this image is kind of low in pixels. So when you go to the next step, it's kind of like color reduction. And you can combine the colors together and have less colors, basically just kind of selecting the ones you don't want and deleting them, and then they get combined with like their closest sort of join. Have as many colors of pink and gray as you want. At the end of the day, we're still probably going to get the same results, and that's it gets rough. Now this stage here, the less you put on, kind of the more it will pick up in terms of details in the artwork. The more you put on, then the less it will pick up in details in the artwork. And so it's kind of like how when I'm tracing your artwork, how strictly shall I take it? It's kind of the way I read it, and less gives more, if that sounds kind of funny. But that said, I'll put it all the way to like the least. And down here, it's sort of sensing that white is a background color, and we probably don't want to embroider it. And that's absolutely true. If you wanted to white, then you'd have to check here to get it. But so let's just say next. There's one more question, and it's kind of like, what do you want with lock stitches and trims? Let's just tell it to always lock stitch and always trim and say finished. And so, okay, now the software is working on it. It's tracing the design and kind of doing its best interpretation of it, and we end up with this. Now right away you're like, oh, I don't know, that doesn't look kind of what I was after. But when it comes right down to it, Matt, this is where the issue is if you look at the original JPEG, and it's quite sort of low in resolution, and there's a lot of different shades of pink here, and the software is trying to figure out what it's tracing, and there's only so many kind of like ways that you can tell it to pick up more and less. When you get into the automation, you don't have a lot of control over it. You kind of get what you can get. What I'll say about this picture, like looking at it, is first of all, this letter style is gorgeous. And I recognize it. We have it. It's like a built-in font. I recognize that fancy schmancy capital letter, and I'm sure that we've got almost the same match if I was to go to my text tool and then click to like start text. And so I've already got it pulled up because I found it for us. It's called Bridal Large. And look, if I type in here like the word DESIGNER''S and click apply, we'll see how it's kind of similar to the one that's in the logo. Notice how big it is. Like literally, this is, as you probably know, when you have a font that's built in, there's a suggested kind of size range, and this Bridal Large, if I click on the little question mark right here beside the sort of font name, it will tell me some information about it, which is it says the minimum is 2 inches and the maximum is 5 inches, and it looks like the default is about let's see, it's around 3 inches, 63 millimeters here. Let's change this back over to inches, 2.48 inches tall. And so right away, I think it's going to be a challenge to use this exact letter style if this is in fact the size that the customer wants to embroider this. And I measure the capital letter D, and it's like a third of an inch, and so just because I usually do things in metric, what is that in millimeters? It's like 7 millimeters. So this font style is going to be really usable at that particular size. I'll show you how, just what would happen, and I'll tell you why. It's about the width of the skinny part. When you look at this, it's got a fat part, but it's got a very decorative skinny part, and every letter has some sort of skinny areas. And so the question becomes, how wide is the skinny area? And if I take that ruler and I kind of measure across that area, it's only 1.2 millimeters across. If you really prefer to do that one in inches, then it is 0.05 of an inch. And just so you know, that's the bare minimum. Like that is I only have one rule that I ever really give for embroidery, and that's that from one needle penetration to the next should be at least 1 millimeter. And so you can kind of see the problem if we try and take this font and like resize it to be smaller. When I make it smaller, the stitching will start to kind of fail at some point, and you'll see it. It'll look, so if I get it down like here, and then sort of zoom in over there, can you kind of see how the stitching is really just starting to get kind of messy looking, and it's just too skinny to really stitch out? And now there is a solution to that. You know, when you're trying to take, because now I've got this font pushed down to 1.28 of an inch. And remember, it said the suggested minimum was 2 inches. And so I can use pull compensation. And that's in the properties box. It's the one that's kind of like the little purple zigzaggy. And that will allow me to put on either a percentage, well, 10% of nothing is still kind of almost nothing, right? It's so skinny. So I'd rather do it in absolute so I can tell it like how much I want. And if I come in here and say, you know, 0.2 or 0.3 of a millimeter and click apply, it fattens it up, and you'll watch it right there. Did you see it fatten it up? Let me go really close and hit undo. So this is like, I made it too small, and the stitching's getting, like, those stitches are not even going to probably cover that run stitch underlay. Chances are, when the needle moves such a short distance, it really just goes back into the same hole that it just came out of, and it doesn't kind of give anything to sit up on top. So it'll look really messy. So when I added the pull comp, so I'll hit redo, it fattens it up, you know, and in extreme cases, you might need to add lots. Like instead of 0.2, what if I go to 0.5, then apply? Now it's going to be substantially fatter. But to make this font at that small size, and I'm using it at 1 1/3 inches, and I don't think this font is going to be possible at a third, whatever that was, you know, 1/3 of an inch or something like that. Even with pull compensation, there's just only so much detail we can put into kind of like that really tiny size, and it's lost. So whether it's auto digitized or actually from a built-in font, there are kind of some limits to what can be accomplished. But at the end of the day, usually I find auto digitized letters in any font, even with good artwork, don't look as good as the built-in fonts do. And that is because they're auto digitized, whereas the built-in fonts were actually made to be embroidery. And so I always try and do auto digitizing, but then look to see, do I have a close enough font that I could maybe swap out? So coming back to the question with the original customer, if you have better resolution, if you know, if this was a graphic that you could have maybe, sometimes when you're on the internet and there's an image and you click to save it, but if you would have clicked on the image first, there could have been like a larger view. You know, sometimes there's like the thumbnail, but then if you click on the thumbnail, there's a bigger version, and the bigger version might have had more resolution in it. So that could have been like a thing that the customer could have checked. Can I get a better quality image? And certainly if you are on like a website that sells images, they usually have a variety of sizes you can get it at. And I usually go with the biggest. You know, if I'm going to buy one, it's like, well, then give me all the resolution. I can always make it smaller anyways. But because look at, I just want to show, this is a graphic of like a truck with a tree. And notice, again, it's just a JPEG. There's like no shapes in my sequence view. And if I look really closely at it, sure, there's pixels there, you know, I can see them. But you can see how much smaller the pixels are than in this image, and how much kind of cleaner the lines get. And so now, like, even if I just use the magic wand, remember the magic wand is kind of like, auto trace it, but don't auto digitize. In other words, it'll create, if I click on this tire, it'll trace around that tire, and then I can decide what kind of stitching later by selecting it and stitching it in with the tools. So that's kind of like semi-automatic digitizing. Well, if I go back to this picture and it's very high resolution and I click with my magic wand on the truck, it does a good job of making artwork for it. And so this is, now I've got lines that are actually clean enough that I think I could make embroidery from, right? And that's the issue, that when you go over to this long sort of straight-haired girl, that even if I just thought, okay, I'm going to do text, but I'm just going to get the software to do her hair. Well, the original hair, I think part of the problem was the software made it all a fill stitch. And that's pretty typical of auto digitizing. It's a satin path, but it's got a pattern fill. So we might be able to lighten it by just changing the styles of stitches, right? So now we can kind of take all the shapes that the software made and change them from a pattern fill into a satin fill. And that kind of helps a little bit, but I still kind of feel like it lost some of the romance of it all. It's too fat. It's like when it traced those shapes, it didn't know what to do. And it's kind of the opposite. If you take the magic wand and you go, okay, well, what will the magic wand do? So I click on this like black area here, click, and it outlines it. So of course it's going to be in black, so you probably can't see it, but let's just make it a hot pink or something. And can you see how it's like trying to trace out the shape, but it's really struggling with this, it's not a very big thing. It's the whole thing. If I measure it is 0.04 of an inch, it's like literally the minimum sort of stitch width, and we're trying to auto trace it. And it's so, once again, if you don't get the results from automation, I think the question is, well, what else can I do, Trevor? It's a pretty good graphic. Maybe this is all I can get. Can I work with it? And Matt, the answer is yes, I could totally make this into a beautiful design, but it's going to need me to do the tracing, is what it comes right down to it. The software just doesn't have enough good pixels to work with, but I do. And I know, for example, all I have to do is click on that pencil, and then click here to get started. And I can kind of see where the outline is. And so I'll click there and I'll hold my control key down so that I don't have to click too many times, and the software kind of smooths out the line for me. And so I know that this takes time, right? And it's like, but you'd be surprised, it's not that much time. And I love to listen to music, right? Get your favorite Elvis record out, put it on, enjoy the music, and before you know it, the whole thing's done. So all I did was click, 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 click around it. And then when I was kind of at the end of it, I just right clicked. And if I hide the artwork, I have a shape here. Well, it's kind of hard to see because it's in a pink color, but let's just make it like black for a minute. So you see what I drew, but what I drew looks pretty much what the artwork looked like, right? I'm not struggling to see it. I can see the lines. And all I have to do is click on Auto Satin to like fill it in with the thread. And I think that looks much nicer than, what we got with before. And so, I love to do this kind of work. Like, I'm a person that likes to create. If these are too skinny, so once again, how wide are they? Measure. And again, I have a hard time doing that in inches. And so I often switch to metric to measure the small stuff, because it says it's 0.7 of a millimeter. And my kind of rule is I need it to be more like 1. And so I kind of look at that and go, could I fatten this? Because if I don't want to fatten it, my other option is to do it as a run stitch. So as a run stitch, I could click on the artwork tool and like click here to start drawing and just draw down the middle, instead of doing like around the outside of it. If I just draw down the middle and I right click and then I select that shape and tell it to be a run stitch. So now I have just a single line in there, and then again, let's just make them all black so you can kind of see it. But this is the way that you can create a more detailed design. You decide between satin stitches, run stitches. If you think run stitches don't look good and you want them all to look like the same kind of stitch or something, then fine. Go back. I'm just hiding the artwork here. So this is a button that's like show hide the backdrop. Turn on your backdrop, zoom in really close, like I'm literally 2000% zoomed in here, so I can be very accurate. Click on your pencil, trace out your shape the best you can. And if you're trying to make it a little wider, it's not wrong to go kind of on the outside of the edge, right? I could even maybe here we'll cheat and make it to the inside and actually make it physically bigger. Like I know that it's too skinny. So this is digitizing, Matt. This is what I love to do. This is really my passion for teaching, is to teach people how to do all this stuff. If you get to this stage and you're like, it's pretty good, but it's a little bit skinny, you've also got that pull compensation tab that I showed you about. Go in there and add 0.2 pull comp. Now your 0.7 millimeter thing is now 1.2. You can make them wider. So yeah, I mean, the good news is there's totally the tools to do it. The bad news is sometimes automatic digitizing just isn't the right answer. And as much as I love to teach how to do it, and when it is the right answer, it sure is great. But I hope that helps you guys. If you're sitting there looking at it going, how am I going to do this? Just know that if you're willing to take the time to learn to use the pencil and trace your own shapes and then convert them into embroidery, that you can get very predictable results. And there are limits, physical limits to how small you can go, like we talked about the 1 millimeter rule. And you can always switch things to run stitches, to satin stitches, to fill stitches, depending on how big it is. But yeah, hopefully that's not the disappointing answer, and that it's, people can understand that it kind of depends on what you got and what you're trying to get to, because maybe the question was actually that's meant to be the full back of a jacket, and the picture might have only been 2 inches, but we were making it 8 inches. Well, then there's a lot more room, to make all those satin columns and even to use the stock fonts. So I think that's really where size is like the very first question you have to decide. Well, how big am I making this? And we didn't know the answer to that, but that would be the first question I would ask. And at the end of the day, if people are writing in to ask about automatic digitizing, really it does what it does, and there's not a lot you can do. The other thing you can do with automatic digitizing is get better artwork, or go into a graphic program and work on the artwork. I know some people like to work in programs like Photoshop, and they'll try to like jack up the contrast, or they'll maybe even draw draw their artwork in another art program first and then save it to Floriani. But as always, Floriani needs artwork. And so if you have artwork, like if you're actually looking, and if your customer says to you, we have our logo, ask them, do you have it in an SVG format? Because that is the one that comes with the artwork. Like an SVG file would mean that hair would already have been traced, and all we would have needed to have done is selected it and decided that it was a satin stitch or a fill stitch. And it's when you got these JPEG pixelated images that they have to get traced, and the software is pretty good at tracing them, but not so good when they're not good. So I think the old saying is quality artwork in, quality embroidery out, and that's a good example of it. So that said, it's a nice logo and I could totally do it. I bet it would take me a half an hour to trade. By the time I was on the B side of the album, I'd be in the home stretch of digitizing the shapes, right? So when I do our monthly designs, it takes me a good day or two to pull off 5 designs. Depends on how much work you want to put into them, but you can choose pieces that have, some designs have a lot of pieces, and that's what makes them take a long time, because there's just a lot of detail, a lot of little bits. But sometimes I just go for the cute stuff, and I think that's what people like, things for their kids and all that. So anyway, Matt, I probably said more than I was needed to. Thank you so much, Matthew, for taking care of all of the great people that buy the Floriani software. And it's such an important moment in time, you know, when they're frustrated and they reach out, and you're like that most important person in the company that can actually help them and, you know, help us look good. And so thank you for doing that. Just know that if you've ever had a bad experience with support, that we're just human beings and we're here to try our best, you know, and so come on back and try again. But Matthew is awesome at it, and thank you, Matt. And I'm not bad too, but thank God I don't have your job.
It's my pleasure.
I know the few times that I stepped in for Matt, I recognized just how much people really do ask for support, and it's quite a bit. So, you know, great job, Matt. Okay, so that's it for today, I guess. Thanks very much. Have a great day, Matthew.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.